Good afternoon from Rome. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell. In less than 24 hours, Pope Francis will be installed as the bishop of this city in a ceremony in St. Peter's Square behind me. It's been a whirlwind 5 days since Archbishop Jorge Bergoglio of Buenos Aires was elected to the papacy by his fellow cardinals. These were the incredible scenes after Mass yesterday as the new Pope left the Vatican in order to greet the crowds gathered in the Roman streets. It was a moment that thrilled pilgrims and appeared to vex the Pope's security staff. Well, I'm pleased to say that I'm now joined by one of the men who participated in the conclave that elected Pope Francis. My guest is Cardinal Edwin O'Brien, former Archbishop of Baltimore and now Grand Master of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. And Your Eminence, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you.
Remind our viewers again, what is this order?
Order of the Holy Sepulchre has its deep roots in the Middle Ages. And since the mid-19th century, it's been a papal order. The Holy Father, in fact, had my job for many, many years until 1948, and he appoints a cardinal to make sure that we do all we can to support the holy places in the Holy Land and promote Christianity there, and bring pilgrimages to encourage those people who are today, unfortunately, are under some stress.
Absolutely. Let's start with Pope Francis. You came on to EWTN shortly after his election, and I know you didn't know much about him. What's your impression now, 5 days into this papacy? What are you seeing?
I think it's outstanding. No one ever thought we'd see the reaction we have received over the last 48 to 72 hours. I've been in seminary work for many years. It's amazing the amount of calls and emails I've been getting from former students who are now pastors saying thank you, thank you, thank you.
Really?
They identify with him. They see him as a real pastor, and while there might be an age differential, there's certainly not a lack of identification and encouragement that has come about.
And what are some of these qualities they're picking up on that's attracting them?
It's a charism. An old Irish expression, God shears the lamb to temper the wind. And I think every pope we've had, certainly in our century, the last century, has been right for the times. And I think this is a man who is a true carer of souls. He's been an archbishop of a major city for so many years. He knows the problems, he's experienced the problems, and he lives the life that he speaks about, that he preaches. That comes through. And I think that is very, very important for our church today. He's a unique gift for this age, as Benedict was for his few years, and John Paul II was for his.
And looking at those past two papacies, any sense of similarities and differences we're going to see with Pope Francis versus Benedict XVI?
It's early to say, but obviously the way Pope Francis mixed with the people yesterday, he really enjoys crowds and dives into them, and is able to speak to them on their own level. He's a very learned man. He's got a good doctorate. But he's tempered that learning with a good bit of pastoral experience, which I think is going to be a good gift to us in these days when the church is looking for a pastor that can restore some credibility to our Church Universal.
And you yourself are known as a pastor who has a gift for reforming institutions, certainly some of your work with seminaries in the United States and even here at the North American College in Rome. There's been a lot of talk about the need for reform of the Vatican Curia and for strong governance. What's your sense of what gifts this Pope might bring to that task?
Well, they say he's a good administrator. He knows he doesn't have 20 years left, and I would think he'll take a very hard and fast look. He heard quite a bit at our several general congregations when just about every cardinal spoke and said, here's what the church is looking for, not just in the Curia, but right across the board for a renewal. And I think there's some very good suggestions made, and when he has a chance, I think he'll put them into effect and really show that we can be a more effective church.
And any advice you would offer as a cardinal? I know cardinals are there to assist the Holy Father.
Well, when asked, I'll think of something.
Okay. You know, he made an interesting statement the other day that he wants the church to be for the poor, but also for the church to be poor. And a lot of people have puzzled over that, wondering what the second part of that statement meant.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight into that?
Well, he lives a simple life, and I think he's calling all bishops and priests and everybody in the church to realize that the tremendous amount of poverty that is in the world, the tremendous amount of good the Church Universal does for the poor, and not just the materially poor, but the spiritually poor as well, and those who are hurting in every respect. And I think if we directed more of our resources toward this group of people that is looking for help and looking for encouragement, I think we'd be a little poorer financially, economically, but that's what the call of the gospel is, and he believes it, he's lived it, and he's going to call us to it too.
And what's your sense of his impact or perhaps his gifts in dealing with the Holy Land, given your own role there?
Well, in Argentina, he was the ordinary for Eastern Rite Catholics, had no ordinary themselves. Okay. And I think if you're looking for a place to show your concern for the poor, our Christians are suffering tremendously there. And I was over there a couple of months ago, and they appreciate every gesture. And I can just imagine what they will come off with when the Holy Father visits, and I'm sure that will be one of his priorities.
And as former Archbishop, or I should say Emeritus of Baltimore, any sense of what the United States can learn from this new Holy Father?
Well,
Americans?
I think we'll all watch closely and have to be open to new things. I think he's going to bring surprises our way, certainly to the first world, which is us. We have a lot to give. We have given a lot, and we have a lot more to give. And I think he will be a credible coach in enabling us to be the church for the poor and the church that is poor.
You think he'll challenge us then?
He will, in his own way. He's got his own style. And he doesn't wave fingers, but he smiles and he gets his point across, and I think we will listen.
Well, thank you so much, Cardinal OBrien, for joining me.
Good to be with you. Look forward to tomorrow.
So do I. Well, the one thing that seems obvious about Pope Francis is his love of the Eucharist. It was a theme of his episcopate in Argentina and has already figured prominently in his papal addresses. A few years ago, he gave an exclusive interview to EWTN about his devotion to the Blessed Sacrament.
In the Last Supper, we have been born as priests. There isn't the Eucharist without the priesthood, and the priesthood doesn't exist without the Eucharist. Only the priest who has received the sacrament of holy orders can validly celebrate the Eucharist, because there is something mysterious there. The Eucharist isn't a reunion of friends who come to pray and eat bread and wine. The Eucharist is fundamentally priestly. Because the first Eucharist was celebrated in a priestly way by the unique high priest, in whose priesthood we ourselves participate, Jesus Christ. He was the priest and was the victim of this sacrifice. Once, when I was in the seminary, my grandmother told me never to forget that I was going to be a priest, and the most important thing for a priest was to celebrate the Mass. And she reminded me about a mother who said to her son, who was a very holy priest, she told him, celebrate the Mass, each Mass, as if it were the first and the last. With what greatness the priest has to prepare himself to celebrate the Holy Eucharist, such a beautiful thing, such a great thing, something that fills us with joy. And what applies to the priest also applies in a way to each of the faithful who participate in the common priesthood of all the faithful. He can't celebrate the Eucharist, but he can participate in the celebration. This is the greatest thing that can take place during the day. It is the most profound, the most priestly. For this reason, we unite ourselves to Jesus Christ, the priest, who offers his sacrifice to the Father. But back to the priest. If some of you who are listening to me are young people, doesn't this excite you? Don't you feel that God is calling you to this great thing? To have in your hands the body of Christ?
Pope Francis has just concluded a meeting with his home country's head of state, President Cristina Kirchner of Argentina. The news of the papal election has electrified Argentina. It fell to Catholic politician Liliana Negri de Alonso to announce the news to the country's Senate. Let's watch.
I ask for permission to interrupt. I cannot continue my speech. I am extremely moved as a Catholic and as an Argentinian. The Catholics of the world have a new leader. And as an Argentinian, I am so proud of that person. A hero, a martyr, a man who has given his life to the Church with perseverance and loyalty. I bow down symbolically before the new sovereign of the Catholic Church, the successor of Peter, the representative of Christ on earth. And my heart is bursting with pride because an Argentinian brother of ours is now in that position.
porque un hermano argentino ha llegado a ocupar el lugar.
Quite something. Well, joining me now are three other Catholic politicians, this time from the United States. We have Congressman Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska, Congressman Dan Lipinski of Illinois, and Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey. Good to have all of you here with me.
Great to be here.
I guess I'll start with you. Where were you when you heard the news about Pope Francis?
I was in my office. So I was actually in a conference with Republican members when the white smoke burst onto the scene, but then was in my office with my staff, just hanging on to every word. And Lillian, who you just had on, is a very, very brave and effective pro-life lawmaker in Argentina, so it's so great that she broke the news there.
It seemed providential the way that worked out. And tell me where you were.
Well, I was in the same meeting. We were actually meeting with the President of the United States. All of the Republicans in Congress were meeting with him in a special conference. That doesn't happen very often. And we were in the midst of a lot of intense dialogue, looking for common ground, laying out differences, and the President stopped and said, "We have a new Pope," something to that effect. So he got the news apparently right in front of him. So that's how we all first found out.
Oh, okay. And Congressman Lipinski?
Well, I'm a Democrat, so I wasn't in the Republican meeting with the President, so I was in my office waiting for that meeting to get over so we could vote. But I actually had on my iPad, one TV station had a camera on the chimney on the Sistine Chapel.
Oh.
And so I had that so I can carry my iPad around just to make sure. And sure, I saw it. I saw the smoke coming out, and I saw it was white. Ran to my computer, and first thing I did, I went to EWTN on my computer, and Relevant Radio also. Pull them both up and to get the news from the right sources.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. You know, obviously we've only had 5 days so far with Pope Francis, but already he seems to be posing a challenge to Catholics to really get beyond some of the divisions that seem very pronounced in the United States. He's very much emphasizing attention to the poor, but he's unwavering in his support and his defense of innocent life, all human life, and marriage. To what extent, Congressman Smith, do you think he will prove a challenge to Catholics of a Republican persuasion?
Well, I think on the life issue, he will cause a re-energizing, a refocus that is absolutely needed. Throughout the world, there is a tsunami of pro-abortion activism that needs to be confronted with men and women of conscience to stand up and say, not now, not ever, we will protect both the mothers and the babies and the family from this assault. He is now, and he did it as Cardinal in Buenos Aires, was amazingly articulate as well as strong, but also with a great deal of love, even for his opponent. Now, the challenge to care for the poor comes right out of the Gospels, Matthew 25, and there are many of us, Republicans and Democrats, who believe that our mission to protect the poor and the disenfranchised is just like our mission to protect the unborn and their mothers from the violence of abortion.
And what are your thoughts, especially where he might challenge Catholics of a Democratic persuasion?
Well, I'm pro-life, and there aren't many Catholics, Democrats who are pro-life, which is very unfortunate. But what I noticed was the excitement amongst all Catholics. Those who are not pro-life, but really look at caring for the poor, it kind of surprised me. I don't know if it's because the name he chose, Francis, they immediately thought about the poor and speaking out for the poor, the fact that he's a Jesuit, maybe. But the excitement there really surprised me, which is great to see, because it sort of gave me the idea that maybe Pope Francis can bring Catholics together. And I'm very hopeful about that.
Congressman Fortenberry, what do you think? Do you think he could be a bridge, in a sense, even among Catholics who are divided on some of these issues, because he's calling us to such a fullness of Catholic teaching?
Well, I think that's the first narrative that's coming out of his papacy, that he's the bridge between the old world and the new world, that he is a Jesuit with the highest caliber of intellectual training and has remained faithful, but at the same time chooses the name Francis, who exemplifies the charism of poverty. And so I think while he's probably going to build on the great intellectual tradition that Pope John Paul and Pope Benedict left us, synthesizing faith and reason, showing how the intellect is illumined by the faith and faith is built upon reason, he also will inject this charism of poverty and ground us in first principles about how we protect the most vulnerable among us, the unborn child. the mother who's in a tough circumstances, or those who are unemployed and in difficult economic circumstances. So I think this is part of the reason that those kind of paradoxes are creating such an excitement among not only Catholics, but people throughout the world.
And do you think this gives then an opening to someone such as yourself, who's making the pro-life argument, but I know you're very involved in the fight against human trafficking and other issues. Does it give Catholics who are already pro-life a way to start talking to fellow Catholics who haven't thought about those issues, but perhaps respect this man who's obviously loves the poor?
It absolutely does. It's all about enfranchisement, protecting the weakest and the most vulnerable from assault. And this Pope and our church is breathtakingly persistent as well as consistent. You know, the Gospels couldn't be more consistent that you treat someone who is downtrodden, doesn't have means, exactly the way you treat the rich man. As a matter of fact, you dishonor the poor person when you do anything but that. We're all, as Fulton Sheen once said, kings and queens in exile. Someday we'll all be, God willing, with him in heaven, and we need to treat everybody here on earth in that way. And I think this Pope will pull that out from us. First, love God first, love your neighbor as yourself, and reach out in a way that is tangible and stop the surface appeal argumentation. You know, we're in a battle with secular, very aggressive secularism. Not unlike the communism of the past, where especially in places like the Soviet Union, where there was a militant atheism, now there's a militant secularism that puts God outside of the public square. But we need to get back in there and fight, get involved with politics. Liliane Negre, my colleagues here, Democrat and Republican, they are champions for life, champions for the culture of life, so articulated first by John Paul II, Paul VI, and now, of course, by this brand new, magnificent new Pope who's just burst onto the scene.
Well, thank you, Congressman, all of you, and glad to see you working together across the aisle on the issues that matter to all of us. And enjoy the installation Mass tomorrow.
We need some sunshine.
Yeah, we do need some sunshine. And now from the Northern Hemisphere to the Southern Hemisphere, and Cardinal George Pell of Sydney in Australia. On the eve of the papal installation, what has he made of the first 5 days of Pope Francis? That's the question I put to him a few moments ago.
Well, I'm not a close friend. I've met him many times. I've served on groups with him here in Rome. He's a Jesuit, and as a Jesuit, he's already spoken on a number of occasions very beautifully about Jesus. He's a religious man. I mean, that's what popes are for. As a Jesuit, he's obviously well aware of the struggle between good and evil, the two standards. And I think this helps explain his references to the devil, to the importance of struggling to be good and opposing evil. He's from the third world. I think he has a new world capacity to articulate simple truths beautifully and clearly, in an uncomplicated way. He's from Argentina. There are enormous disparities of wealth there, and he's chosen to stand fair square with those who, are not getting a fair go. And I think also he'll be what the Italians call an uomo di governo, a man able to take decisions. I don't think anybody will be manipulating him, and that gives me considerable confidence.
And you spoke pretty openly before the conclave about what you saw as the need for stronger governance of the Vatican. Do you think you have your man here in Pope Francis?
I hope so. I do. I really do. A lot of what needs to be done is not rocket science, and I think we have a man, a Bishop of Rome, a Pope who will do this.
And do you think it's going to be easier or more difficult for him as someone who not only hasn't worked in the Vatican, but hasn't really visited a lot, as you, for instance, have?
Well, he's been here quite a bit off and on, not so much recently.
Okay.
I've got an Irish-Australian mother, and I'd say it'll be both those things. In some ways, a person coming from outside has a greater freedom for action, because he's not friends with too many, close friends with too many of the personnel, which complicate decision making. But as well as that, of course, he wouldn't know the scene as well as he will in 12 months' time. So he will need good advice.
And you mentioned it's not rocket science, but what does better governance of the Vatican, what would that look like if he were successful?
Well, let's start perhaps at the least important end, the finances, regular auditing, basic planning, reforming the communications system. Is it in an age of the internet? Is it appropriate to be spending so much money on radio? Stopping the leaks. I mean, organisations always have some leaks, but I mean, you know, the activities of the former butler were clearly unacceptable by any and every standard. Getting things done quickly, appointing people from around the world of recognised competence to support him and to be here to speak to him honestly when he asks for a point of view, but then when he makes a decision, to do what he wants. So none of those rules are extraordinary. It's what a CEO in any organisation that would have. It's not the most important thing, but it's a foundation so that all the evangelical initiatives can roll forward.
And I know there was a lot of talk about him in the conclave of 2005 as a front runner.
So the press tell us. So the press tell us.
And there was a sense, though, at least that, as you said in the press, that this time around he was considered older and wouldn't be elected for that reason because he's 76. Do you think age is at all a factor in your ability to manage and get a handle on something as complicated as the Vatican Curia?
No, well, we're not ageist in the Catholic Church, and I'd imagine he probably doesn't have the level of energy at 76 that he had at 46. But I'm sure through his wealth of experience, and the Argentine is a tough school, that he'll be a very wise and I suspect formidable Pope.
Now, one thing that you told EWTN going into the conclave was that you saw the reform of the liturgy under Pope Benedict XVI as one of the most significant legacies of his papacy. Yeah. Where do you think that goes from here under Pope Francis?
Well, I'd hope that the whole opening to transcendence, the centrality of Christ, the importance of worship, that will be maintained. I anticipate it will. The Pope will need to go sensitively in this area, not to upset some people who are very much attached not only to the old liturgy but to some of the rubrics of the old liturgy. We've already seen a change. I think there'll be less lace. But I hope that the substantial gains, the whole vertical dimension which was re-emphasized under Benedict, the silence at prayer. Holy Father, we already saw in the Sistine Chapel, he celebrates a beautiful Mass. It's a Mass full of faith and devotion and prayer.
So your sense as someone with obviously knowledge and attention to liturgy is that there's some room then, is there, in terms of celebrating a reverent liturgy but doing so
well,
slightly
already
style?
The Master of Ceremonies of the Vatican here, I don't think he's got any lace on his surplice now. There will be changes. Simplicity. And so, I ask those who are very much attached to the details of the older way of doing things for a little bit of patience, because the Holy Father is Christocentric to every fibre of his being. He'll preach Jesus, he'll celebrate beautiful and reverent liturgies, but possibly with not quite the attention to liturgical detail that Pope Benedict had.
And one final question, new evangelization, big theme obviously for Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI. Where does it go under Pope Francis, and how, especially in Australia, might this Pope be important in that
Well,
effort?
of course, Argentina is a very different world from Australia. And the disparities of wealth in Argentina are nothing like the disparities in Australia, where by international standards, we have a fairly good distribution of wealth. Like everywhere else, I suppose the middle class is being a bit crabbed and confined. The very rich are increasing. Our battlers are not getting poorer. They've been brought along, and we want that to continue. But we're not exactly sure just in what way the new Holy Father will proceed. That's why it's a bit exciting, and you know, there might be more surprises for us, but I think there'll be good surprises.
Well, thank you so much, Cardinal George Pell of Sydney, for joining us today.
Thank you, Colleen. Very happy to do so.
Finally today, as you can see and hear, one man and his guitar. This is Argentinian guitarist Omar Cirunik. Omar, as someone from Argentina, what was it like to hear the news about Pope Francis?
It was an amazing situation, you know, because I was here in Italy for a big project, playing Argentine music for a Italian guitarist, Giorgio Albiani, a big project, and the day first we have the concert here in Rome, and Cesena and Grosseto. He selected this Papa from Argentina. It was absolutely incredible, incredible.
Oh, well, good timing you had.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. Well, we're out of time. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell, and now I'm going to send you back to Doug Keck in Alabama. Doug?
And thank you so much, Colleen, and your whole crew. That's EWTN's Vatican Daily, just ended, but if you missed any portion of it, you can catch the entire program at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time here on EWTN. Check out our website, EWTN.com, for the time in your time zone. And of course, the big event is coming up tomorrow, the Mass for the inauguration of the Pontificate of Pope Francis. And now it's at 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That again is Tuesday, March 19th. That's tomorrow. It's at 3:30 a.m., but we will encore that event, that Mass, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and then again at midnight to give you plenty of opportunities to participate in this wonderful event. And speaking of other wonderful events, we have the Mass of Thanksgiving for the election of Pope Francis. That will be at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, Washington, D.C. Now that's Tuesday as well, and that will be at noontime. And I will be here with Tom Nash to help you through that event. Don't forget, you can download our free apps. You can watch us on EWTN. You can check us out on YouTube. Another thing I wanted to mention is just the fact that you can go to our EWTN religious catalog, and our religious catalog offering books. A lot of people are interested in finding out all about St. Francis. There's a wonderful G.K. Chesterton book, and another one by St. Bonaventure. There's some information also on St. Ignatius if you want to learn more about the Jesuits. Kind of mixed there for our Holy Father. And there's several books coming out about Pope Francis, and one of them I know is Matthew Bunson has written a book. Dr. Matthew Bunson has a book coming out from OSV, which we will be definitely offering, and probably a couple of others. So go to our website, EWTNreligiouscatalog.com, or call 1-800-854-6316. And there we have it. We want you to like us on Facebook, check us out on Twitter, check out the National Catholic Register, and also don't forget Father Roger Landry, who was very popular on the panel with Raymond, has got a new series airing right now, Remembering Jesus, along with Dr. Vincent Fortenberry. And for EWTN, I'm Doug Keck. Thank you so much for being with us. More ahead.